when the town of Willowbend was still young and the roads were nothing more than dusty paths stitched between fields of golden wheat, there lived a girl named June Whittaker, a quiet 16-year-old with ease, the color of early morning sky. Her grandmother used to say that June had a soul that remembered things it never learned. June wasn't sure what that meant, but she kept the words tucked in her heart like a hidden jewel. She lived in a wooden farmhouse on the edge of the town, where the maple trees stood tall and old, whispering secrets in the wind. Her father, Samuel Whittaker, was a kind man who fixed wagons and farm tools for the townsfolk. He worked hard, smiled often, and always kept a special softness in his face whenever he spoke of June's mother, who had passed away when June was just a baby. June grew up surrounded by stories, the kind her grandmother, Margaret, told while sitting in her rocking chair by the window, stories of old magic, wind spirits, wandering stars, and a place called the Quiet Vale, a hidden valley whispered about in old American folklore. Margaret had passed away 3 years earlier, but June still felt her presence whenever she walked through the farmhouse, especially near the old storage attic where Margaret had kept her books. One warm autumn afternoon, when the sky had begun to blush with sunset, June climbed up to the attic. Dust floated in the slanted rays of sunlight, turning the air gold. She wasn't searching for anything in particular. She only felt a strange tug in her chest, almost like someone calling her silently. She pushed aside a wooden chest, then another, until her foot hit something solid beneath the floorboards. When she knelt down and brushed away the dust, she found a narrow, rectangular lid carved with swirling patterns. Her heart fluttered. She had never seen it before. June lifted the lid carefully. Inside lay a small leather-bound book. Its surface faded, but the edges surprisingly soft. When she picked it up, she noticed an inscription pressed into the leather in her grandmother's handwriting. For June, when the wind begins to whisper. June's breath caught. She sat cross-legged on the attic floor, opened the book, and began to read the first page. The handwriting was old-fashioned, looping gently, each sentence filled with warmth. My dear June, if you are reading this, then you have begun to hear what others cannot. June's heart beat hard. You are part of something older than Willowbent, older than any of us. Our family carries a gift, the ability to hear the old wind. It speaks only to those it has chosen. And it has chosen you. June's hands trembled as she turned the page. The Quiet Vale is real. It lies north of Willowbend, hidden behind the ridge of Fernwood. There is a door there, though invisible to the When the wind calls your name, follow it. The old wind will protect you. June closed the book, pressing it to her chest. Her grandmother had never spoken of this, in words, only in fairy tales. But reading the letter felt like being pulled into a truth she had always sensed but never dared to believe. That night, as June lay in bed listening to the distant sounds of crickets and the soft hum of the fields, she felt it for the first time. A warm breeze slipped through the open window and brushed her cheek as gently as a mother's hand. But instead of fading, the breeze pulsed softly, almost like a voice, without sound. It whispered, "Not a word, not yet, but a pull, a direction, a calling." June sat up, her heart racing. She reached for the leather-bound book and pressed her palm against its cover. The breeze grew stronger, swirling around her, lifting the strands of her hair. She whispered, "Grandma, what do you want me to do?" The breeze brushed her cheek again, warm, reassuring, then slipped back out the window toward the northern fields. June stood. Something in her bones knew. She had to follow. But she couldn't leave without telling her father. She tiptoed downstairs. Careful not to wake the house with creaks. Samuel sat on the couch, half asleep with a book resting on his chest. His graying beard glowed softly in the lamplight. June hesitated. How could she explain something she barely understood? Just then, her father stirred, opening one eye. "June, you're up late?" June swallowed. "Dad, I think I need to go somewhere." "Up near Fernwood Ridge." He blinked, confused. "At night!" I know it sounds strange, but I feel like Grandma's trying to tell me something." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, instead of scolding or dismissing her. His eyes softened with a sadness she hadn't seen before. "I wondered when this day would come," he whispered. June's heart thudded. You knew something about this. He nodded slowly. Your grandmother had a gift. Your mother, too. They both told me that one day the wind would call for you. He rubbed his forehead. I don't understand it, June, but I trust them. And I trust you. June felt tears sting her eyes. Dad, he stood, walked to her slowly, and cupped her face gently. You go where the wind leads you. But promise me something. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. Anything. Come back to me. June threw her arms around him, holding tight. He smelled like wood smoke and pine, like safety and home. When she stepped outside, the night air greeted her like an old friend. The breeze curled around her wrist, tugging her northward. She followed it across the moonlit fields, her lantern bobbing softly at her side. The path wound through tall grass, whispering against her legs. The night sky glittered with 1,000 stars, brighter than she'd ever seen before. It felt as though they were watching her, waiting for something. By the time she reached Fernwood Ridge, the moon hung high and pale, casting silver light across the valley below. The ridge itself was steep, dotted with old oak trees whose branches curled like old hands. She climbed carefully, the wind guiding her between the rocks and roots. At the top, the air grew still. Below her lay a narrow valley, but something felt wrong, or rather, too quiet. The valley didn't move like valleys should. No crickets, no rustle of grass, no sound at all. Just silence. Then the breeze swirled around her, circling twice, before drifting forward into the valley as if marking a path. June tightened her grip on the lantern and began to descend. Halfway down, she noticed something strange. The ground shimmered, almost like heat rising from a summer road. But instead of fading, the shimmer spread into the shape of an archway, invisible moments before. June stared, her breath catching. This was the door her grandmother wrote about, the entrance to the quiet vale. The breeze danced through the archway and beckoned her forward. June stepped through. The world beyond the shimmer changed instantly. The grass glowed faintly, like moonlit frost. The trees stood tall and ancient, their leaves whispering secrets older than Willowbend. In the distance, she saw a soft glow, like lanterns hung high in the branches. She took one step, then another. The wind whispered again, clearer this time. June? She froze, her heart squeezed. It was her grandmother's voice. She knew it more surely than she knew her own. Grandma, she whispered. The lanterns in the trees flickered, glowing brighter. And the wind spoke again, warm, loving, familiar. Welcome home, child. June fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face. The quiet veil shimmered around her like a dream, stitched from memory and magic. The wind curled around her shoulders like an embrace. For the first time in her life, June felt the ancient truth settle into her bones. She belonged here. She was meant for this, and her grandmother's spirit was waiting. Her journey had just begun. Asterisk. The morning after the lantern's glow visited Eleanor's window, the valley woke under a blanket of silver mist, as though the moon had forgotten to take back its veil. Eleanor rose early. Long before the palace bells rang for breakfast, she had slept lightly, her dreams filled with drifting lights and distant bells she could not explain. As she dressed, she kept touching her bedside drawer, confirming that the little pearl lantern still lay inside, safe and real, not a dream or a story made from longing. Downstairs, the castle felt unusually quiet. The servants moved softly. The cooks whispered. Even the old hound Baxter slept without snoring. Eleanor carried the lantern discreetly inside her pocket. She wanted to speak to her grandmother, but Grandma Mabel wasn't at her usual spot by the grand window with her tea. A wooden knitting needle lay on the cushion where she always sat, as if she had left in haste. Eleanor's heart fluttered. Grandma Mabel never left quickly. She moved with the slow rhythm of old clocks and calm breezes. Something was different. When she stepped into the breakfast hall, her father, King Rama, looked up from the head of the table with tired eyes. His hair, always neatly combed, stood uneven, and his normally calm face had a crease that should not be there. He gave her a long look, one that told her he had not slept either. "You're awake early," he said, closing a leather-bound book that lay open beside his plate. Eleanor sat. "I had strange dreams." The king paused. "Lantern dreams," her breath caught. "How did you know?" Instead of answering, he opened the old book again and slid it toward her. The pages were brittle, filled with hand-drawn sketches of floating lanterns, mountains, rivers, names of old places no one spoke of anymore. She stared at the drawings, beautiful spheres filled with glowing bells, drifting through dark sky. They looked exactly like the lantern she had found. Before either of them spoke again, a soft knock came from the doorway, and Grandma Mabel entered. She was wrapped in her quilted shawl, her silver hair floating around her like dawn mist. But what caught Eleanor's attention was the lantern Grandma Mabel carried, oval, glowing faintly lilac. Eleanor rose from her chair. "You have one too." Grandma Beru. Eyes watered, not from fear, but from a deep remembering. "I used to be a keeper," she whispered, "long before you were born." The king stood, pushing his chair back. "Mother, you should not. Hush." "Raymond," she said, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "The lanterns have returned. The valley remembers before the people do." Eleanor had never felt so caught between fear and wonder. She pulled her lantern from her pocket, and the moment the two lanterns saw one another, both flared softly, warming the air. Grandma Mabel nodded. "Yes, they've chosen you." "Chosen me for what?" Eleanor whispered. Grandma Mabel motioned for her to follow. "Let's go where I can explain." They left the castle quietly, slipping through the east courtyard gate where vines curled over stone. As they stepped beyond the palace grounds, Eleanor felt a gentle trembling in the earth, as if something just beneath the soil was stirring awake after a long sleep. "Grandma." Mabel led her to an old stone bench beneath a copper maple tree. Eleanor had played there as a child, unaware that the roots grew into the oldest parts of the valley. The morning mist still clung to the ground, curling around their ankles. Mabel sat and placed her purple glowing lantern between them. "When I was young, about your age," she began, "this valley was not like it is now. Night was filled with drifting lights, soft bells, whispers of guidance. The lanterns protected us. They showed paths, calmed storms, healed wandering spirits." Eleanor listened with wide eyes. "What happened to them?" "People forgot to listen," Mabel said sadly. The lanterns dimmed. Their keepers grew old, and eventually the valley fell silent. Eleanor thought of the strange quietness that morning. "And now they're returning." Her grandmother nodded. "Which means something has awakened in the valley, something that needs a keeper's light again." "But why me?" Grandma Mabel looked deeply into her granddaughter's eyes. "Because you still believe in what others call stories. Lanterns don't choose power or royalty. They choose hearts that still hear wonder." A breeze passed through the trees. The lanterns flickered, synchronized, like breathing. Eleanor touched the pearl on her lantern. "What do they want me to do?" "To follow when they call you," Mabel said. "To go where the valley needs you. And, perhaps, to finish what the keepers did not." The words both thrilled and frightened Eleanor. She felt a gentle tugging at her elbow, her lantern vibrating softly. It glowed brighter, warming her palm. "It's starting already," Grandma Mabel whispered. "The light is calling you." Eleanor looked toward the woods, the mist drifting like ghosts. "Now, soon." Mabel stood slowly, using the bench for support. "But before you go anywhere, there is something I must give you." She reached into her shawl and pulled out a small wooden box carved with swirling patterns. Eleanor recognized it. She had once asked about it as a child, but Mabel always said it would open only when the right time came. Mabel placed it in Eleanor's hands. Immediately, the lantern glowed brighter, as if greeting an old friend. "Open it," her grandmother whispered. Eleanor lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded piece of cloth, pale blue and stitched with silver thread. When she unfolded it, she realized it was a Sasha keeper's sash, embroidered with symbols matching those in the king's old book. "This was mine," Mabel said softly. "Now it's yours." Eleanor clutched it, feeling the threads hum with ancient energy. Her lantern shone as if proud. Grandma Mabel reached out and touched her cheek. "You are not alone in this. As long as you carry your lantern, the valley will watch over you." Eleanor swallowed, overwhelmed. "What must I do first?" Mabel looked toward the woods. "Tonight, when both moons rise, follow the lantern's call. It will guide you to the first place you must see." Eleanor leaned closer. "What place?" But before Mabel could answer, the second lantern, the lilac one, began ringing softly from within, like a tiny silver chime warning of distant trouble. Mabel's face grew serious. "The valley is waking faster than I thought." Eleanor's heart thumped. "What does that mean?"
"It means the shadows are moving too."
Eleanor stiffened. "Shadows? Darkness that once tried to swallow the lanterns?" Mabel said quietly. "Shadows that move without body. They feed on forgotten places and abandoned hope." A tear moved across Eleanor's arms. She clutched her lantern instinctively. "But the light keeps them away," Mabel said firmly. "Remember that. Light always answers darkness, even when darkness seems stronger." Eleanor nodded slowly. They walked back to the castle together. Every so often, Eleanor thought she saw dark shapes shifting in the mist, shadows that moved a moment too late or lingered a moment too long. But she kept telling herself they were tricks of tired eyes. Inside the palace, the king waited anxiously by the gate. When he saw them return, he hurried forward. "Mother, is it time?" he asked, worried. Grandma. Mabel nodded gravely. "It's time. Eleanor will need your support just as I once needed mine." The king's gaze softened toward his daughter. "Whatever path your lantern shows you, you won't walk it without my blessing." Eleanor felt a strange mixture of courage and fear settle into her bones. The weight of the sash in her pocket grounded her. That night, as the castle dimmed and servants lit candles along the halls, Eleanor sat by her bedroom window watching for the two moons to rise, the silver and the pale rose. The valley outside hummed softly, as though whispering her name. Her lantern lay on the table beside her, glowing brighter with each passing minute. At last, the first moon crested the hill, its silver light washing over the valley. Then the second moon followed, casting a faint pink hue like a memory of lost dreams. The lantern pulsed in her hand. "All right," she whispered, slipping the sash across her shoulder and securing her cloak. "Show me the way." The lantern lifted gently from her palm, floating a few inches into the air. It drifted toward the balcony with slow, deliberate motion. Eleanor stepped outside, her breath visible in the cool night. The lantern bobbed once, then glided toward the woods beyond the palace. Eleanor hesitated only once as she climbed down the ivy wall, just as she had in childhood, sneaking out to chase fireflies. But tonight, the wind carried strange sound spell chimes, drifting whispers, rustling leaves, even when the branches didn't move. She followed the lantern down the stone path, into the tall grass glowing under moonlight. Her heart pounded, but the lantern stayed steady, never wavering. When she reached the woods, the scent of pine and old earth wrapped around her. The lantern's glow pushed back the shadows, but she could swear she saw shapes fleeing its light. One shadow lingered too long, stretching thin, becoming almost human-shaped before retreating. Eleanor tightened her grip on her sash. "I see you," she whispered, though she did not know if the shadows understood words. The lantern drifted deeper into the woods, the trees parting as if recognizing its old magic. She walked until the air grew colder and the night grew quieter. So quiet even the crickets dared not sing. Finally, the lantern stopped above a small clearing where a circle of stones lay partly buried in moss. Eleanor froze. She had seen these stones before only once, drawn in her grandmother's old stories, etched in fading ink. The lantern, circle, the birthplace of the keepers. Her lantern floated to the center and glowed with an intensity she had never seen. It cast beams of light that touched each stone, awakening ancient symbols carved deep into their surface. The stones lit one by one. A hum filled the clearing, low, deep, vibrating through her bones. Eleanor stepped closer, breathless, her lantern pulling her forward like a guiding heartbeat. Something rose from the earth inside the small box wrapped in vines. Her lantern drifted above it, ringing softly. Eleanor bent down and brushed the vines aside. The box opened easily, as if waiting centuries for her hand. Inside lay a single object. A glowing feather, blue as twilight, warm as memory, breathing with soft magic. She stared. A keeper's feather. Grandma, Mabel had spoken of them only once feathers, given by the valley's oldest guardian, the spirit bird of light. Eleanor reached out, the feather rose, hovering, circling her lantern, as if greeting an old companion. Then, very softly, she heard a voice, not a whisper, not a song, something between both. The first step is taken. Keeper, Eleanor gasped, spinning around. No one was there. But the voice came again, drifting like wind through ancient leaves. The valley wakes, and so must you. Then the forest went completely still. And somewhere far behind her, deep within the shadows, two dark shapes slowly began to rise. Eleanor stood frozen in the center of the clearing, the glowing feather hovering gently in the air beside her lantern. She felt its warmth, brushing her cheek like a whisper of wind from a long-forgotten summer. The woods around her remained still, too still, as if every branch, every stone, every creature held its breath. The voice that had spoken still lingered faintly in her ears, drifting like a memory she couldn't hold on to. She turned in a slow circle, her eyes searching the shadows between the trees. No figure appeared. No face. No movement. Only the lantern's soft light and the low hum of the awakened stones. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wasn't sure if she was frightened or strangely comforted. The voice hadn't sounded dangerous. If anything, it carried the weight of an ancient sorrow, like someone who had been waiting for centuries. The feather lowered slowly, settling into her open palms. It was warm, almost alive, pulsing with tiny lights that flickered like fireflies. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered without knowing why. The lantern bobbed gently, almost in approval. But before she could take another breath, a crack echoed through the trees behind her. Not a branch falling, this was sharper. A footstep. Heavy? Slow. Eleanor stiffened. The lantern spun toward the sound. Its glow intensified, washing through the dark trees in wide, trembling arcs. And that's when she saw it. A shape. No, a shadow shaped like a person. It walked slowly, with long limbs that did not match its steps. The darkness around it seemed to slide off the trees, clinging to its form as if feeding it. Eleanor stumbled back, her heart slamming against her ribs. The creature stopped at the edge of the clearing, and though it had no face, no eyes, she felt it watching her, studying her. Thirsty. The feather in her palm glowed brighter, sensing danger. Her lantern rose higher, trembling with a low, ringing sound that built into something sharper. "Lantern," she whispered, barely breathing. "Light, please! Light!" The lantern burst with a sudden flare, white and gold like a star igniting. The shadow recoiled violently, twisting and shrinking away from the glow. Its form rippled like smoke being torn apart by wind. It let out a faint, hollow hiss. Then, without warning, it lunged. Eleanor gasped and staggered back, raising the feather instinctively. The glowing feather shot forward in a streak of blue light, hitting the shadow squarely in its chest. The creature shrieked, not shrieked, but made a sound like wind ripping through a broken house. Its body split into dark ribbons that curled upward and disappeared. The clearing fell silent again. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, shaking, breathless. Her lantern drifted close, circling her like a worried friend. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. A rustle behind her made her jump, but this time it wasn't a shadow. A figure pushed through the bushes, their boots crunching leaves softly. Eleanor's fear turned instantly into shock. It was a boy, maybe 17, dressed in worn boots, a thick forest green coat, and carrying a pack slung over one shoulder. His sandy blonde hair was messy, his face smudged with dirt, but his soft hazel eyes were alert and concerned. He raised both hands when he saw her lantern flare again. "Whoa! No! Please don't burn me," he said quickly. "I'm not one of them." Eleanor stared at him, still breathing hard. Who are you? Caleb?" he said, taking a cautious step forward. Caleb Whitlock? I've been tracking those shadow things for 2 days. I saw your lantern from the ridge and… He scratched the back of his neck, looking embarrassed. I thought maybe a shadow was attacking someone. Looks like I was right.
Eleanor blinked.
You know about the shadows, he nodded. Yeah, and I know you shouldn't be out here alone at night. My lantern brought me, she said defensively. Caleb pointed at the floating light. Yeah, I figured. Keeper's lantern, right? Eleanor's eyes widened. How do you know that word? Caleb looked at the glowing stones, then at the feather still hovering near her shoulder. Because I've been searching for someone like you. My family. Well, we've been studying the valley's old magic for generations. And lately, we noticed signs the lanterns might come back. He knelt near the circle of stones, touching the moss with reverence. I never thought I'd see the lantern circle awaken.
This is
Incredible! Eleanor stood, still wary. If you've been studying this, then tell me who, was the voice. Caleb looked up sharply. You heard it? Yes. He exhaled. Then, it's true. The spirit bird is awake again. Eleanor tilted her head. Spirit bird. Caleb gave a small, almost shy smile. A guardian of light? Not a bird like we know more, like a being made of memory and magic. It protected the valley long ago. But when the lanterns dimmed, it fell into a deep sleep. So, the feather is a piece of its light, Caleb finished. It must have chosen you. Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and fear. Chosen me? For what? Caleb stood, dusting off his knees. To restore the valley, probably. And stop the shadows before they grow stronger. And what? Eleanor whispered. Caleb glanced at her lantern, and to find the heartlight. Eleanor shivered. What's the heartlight? He opened his mouth to answer, but the lantern suddenly flared again, spinning rapidly like a frightened bird. Ah, Caleb muttered. That's not good. 2 more shadows rose behind the trees, then 3, then 5. Eleanor stepped back until her shoulders hit one of the stones. There are so many. They're multiplying, Caleb said, his voice tense. The lantern's awakening must have drawn them. Eleanor's fear exploded. We have to go, right? Caleb grabbed her hand. Stay close. Lantern guide us? The lantern darted into the air like a shooting star, slicing through the darkness toward a narrow path between birch trees. Eleanor and Caleb ran after it, their feet pounding the earth. The woods blurred into streaks of silver and shadow. The shadows followed, gliding silently, gaining speed. Caleb looked back. They're too fast, keep running. Eleanor clutched her sash as branches whipped past. The lantern's glow led them through twisting paths she didn't recognize. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she didn't dare slow down. A shadow lunged from the side. Eleanor shrieked, but Caleb pulled her down just in time. The shadow hit a tree, dissolving with a hiss. Are you okay? He gasped. Yes, keep going. They burst out of the thick woods and into a wide field of tall grass glowing under moonlight. The lantern hovered above a cluster of boulders near the far end, but the shadows were closing in from all sides. Caleb grabbed Eleanor's hand tighter. We're too exposed here. The lantern suddenly dove toward a narrow crack between 2 boulders, shining brightly into the stone. A hiding place. Ere no ashutetto. Only one way to find out. They squeezed into the crack just as the shadows reached the field. Darkness swept over the rocks like a wave. Eleanor pressed herself against the cold stone, her heart hammering. Caleb shielded her instinctively. Shadows scraped at the entrance. Unable to reach inside, Eleanor held her breath. At last, the scraping faded. After several long minutes, Kayla whispered, I think they can't enter. Eleanor slowly exhaled. Why? Caleb pointed at the stone walls, lined with faint carvings. Because this place is old keeper made. Shadows can't breach old light marks. Eleanor looked around. She hadn't realized the crack opened into a tiny hidden chamber carved into the rock. The lantern drifted inside, glowing warmly, as if relieved. Caleb slid down the wall, breathless. What Welcome to Keeper Ruins, I guess. Eleanor sat beside him, her adrenaline finally fading into exhaustion. So the shadows are growing stronger? Fast, Caleb said grimly. And if they're hunting keepers, that means something darker is rising. Eleanor hugged her knees. Caleb, what is the Heartlight? He hesitated. It's powerful. Ancient. Said to be the source of all lantern magic. If the shadows get to it first? He looked at her, his hazel eyes serious. They could darken the valley forever. Eleanor felt a cold chill run through her. She looked at her lent in the warm, glowing little sphere that had chosen her. She touched its side gently. What are we supposed to do? She whispered. Caleb gave a tired, hopeful smile. You already started. You awakened the lantern circle. You found the feather. And now? He nudged her shoulder softly. You won't be doing this alone? Eleanor swallowed, tears pricking her eyes despite her trying not to let them fall. I'm scared. Caleb nodded. Me too. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the faint wind outside the stones. The lantern settled between them, glowing softly like an old friend, comforting them both. Eleanor finally whispered, Caleb, yeah? Do you really think the valley chose me? He nodded. I think it's been waiting for you. Eleanor closed her eyes. She didn't feel ready, but she felt chosen. As the lantern dimmed into a soft, resting glow. Eleanor leaned her head lightly against the stone and let the feather rest in her hands. Outside, far in the distance, something deep and ancient stirred something that did not welcome the return of light. Eleanor woke in the stone chamber to the faintest glow of dawn slipping through the crack in the rock. Her body ached from sleeping on the cold floor, but her mind woke sharply, as if her dreams had been whispering warnings she could no longer remember. Caleb was already awake, leaning against the stone wall with his pack open in front of him. He was sorting through small jars of herbs, flint stones, and folded scraps of old maps. His lanternless hands trembled slightly from the cold. Morning, he said quietly when he noticed her stirring. Eleanor pushed herself upright. Did you sleep at all? He shrugged. A little. Shadows didn't come back. He nodded toward the tiny opening that served as their door. Light marks held the whole night. Eleanor looked at her lantern resting in a small depression of stone, its glow soft and warm like an old candle waking slowly. The keeper's feather floated nearby, hovering as if guarding its companion. For a moment, peace settled over Eleanor Thin, but reeled up. But then Caleb's expression turned serious. We can't stay here, he said. Shadows will only keep growing, and if the spirit bird is awake, it might be calling you to the Heartlight. Eleanor swallowed. Where do we find it? Caleb pulled out a torn piece of parchment. It showed crude drawings of mountains, rivers, circles with lines through them. He pointed at a symbol shaped like a teardrop with rays. This mark here, he said. The old records call it the Gleaming Hollow. My great-grandfather believed the Heartlight was kept there. Kept, Eleanor echoed. By who? By the first keepers, Caleb said. Before even your grandmother's time, Eleanor imagined ancient keepers, cloaked in light, walking these same paths centuries ago. The thought steadied her. She touched her sashta, one her grandmother had given hand felt its threads hum faintly. What happens if we reach the Heartlight? She asked. That depends, Caleb said honestly. If the shadows get there first, it's over. But if you get there, the valley might shine again. Eleanor exhaled slowly. She wasn't sure she was ready for over or shine again. She was just trying to breathe. Suddenly, a soft ringing filled the chamber. Her lantern lifted from the stone like a bird, waking to flight that the keeper's feather glowed brighter, circling the lantern once, twice, 3 times before shooting toward the crack in the rock. Caleb stood quickly. It's calling. We need to follow it. Eleanor grabbed her cloak and followed him into the morning light. The world outside felt different. The air had a heavy stillness, as if nature itself braced for something approaching. The shadows were gone, at least for now, but the forest held a lingering tension. The lantern floated ahead, weaving through the trees with urgent speed. Caleb kept pace beside her. It's leading us toward the North Woods. Eleanor recognized the direction. The old river trail. Yeah, Caleb said. We'll reach the foothills from there. They moved quickly, passing ancient pines and moss-covered stones. Birds stayed silent. Even the wind whispered quieter than usual, as they walked. Eleanor's mind kept drifting back to her grandmother. Caleb, she said softly, do you think Grandma Mabel knows this was going to happen? Caleb thought for a moment. I think she remembered more than she let on. Keepers don't forget the valley's call, even if years pass. Eleanor nodded. She wondered what Mabel had faced in her own youth, what dangers she had carried quietly all Eleanor's life. She felt a surge of love and fear mixed together. The lantern led them deeper until they reached the old river trail, a winding path of smooth stones beside a shrunken river. Once it had been wide and bright, flowing with clean water. Now it was narrow, tired, as if the valley itself felt drained. The lantern hovered above the riverbed, its glow reflecting faintly in the water. Caleb frowned. Strange. The river's nearly dry. Eleanor stepped carefully on the stones. Do you think the shadows did this? Maybe, he said. Or maybe the valley's magic is fading without the heartlight. They followed the lantern along the river until the banks opened into a clearing. But something was different. Now Eleanor's lantern dimmed slightly, pulsing in slow, uneasy waves. Caleb stiffened. Something's wrong. Eleanor felt it too, a pressure in the air. Like a storm about to break? The lantern stopped abruptly. The ground rumbled. Eleanor grabbed Caleb's arm as cracks spread across the earth beneath their feet. From the shadowed edge of the clearing, 3 black figures emerged, not thin, misty shadows like before, but denser, darker, taking on sharper forms. These shadows had grown. They had arms, shoulders, faces that almost looked human, though twisted and empty. Caleb stepped protectively in front of Eleanor. Move back. Slowly, but the shadows moved faster than words. One lunged. Eleanor raised her lantern, but the shadow slapped the light aside with a shriek. The lantern dimmed, stumbling mid-air. Caleb shouted, "The feather! Use the feather!" Eleanor grabbed it, raising it like a blade, but the feather flickered uncertainly. "Come on!" she whispered desperately. Another shadow surged forward. Caleb tackled Eleanor to the ground, just as actual claws lashed at the air where they had been standing. The lantern flared weakly, struggling. Eleanor's heart pounded. "It's too many, we have to run!" Caleb pulled her up. "This way!" They sprinted toward the trees, but the shadows were faster. One blocked their path, towering above Eleanor like a nightmare made of smoke and hate. Caleb looked at her, chest heaving. "Eleanor, listen. You have to call it!" "Call what?" "The spirit bird." Eleanor shook her head wildly. "I don't know how."
Yes, you do.
Caleb yelled. "It chose you. Call it the same way you called the lantern." The shadow lunged again. Eleanor raised the feather, squeezing it in both hands. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, help us!" The feather burned with blue fire. The lantern blazed gold, and above them far, above the morning, sky split with a sound like distant bells. A beam of white light shot down through the clouds. The shadows screamed and shriveled, fleeing backward as if the world itself rejected them. Then it descended, a shape of swirling feathers made of light and memory, wings stretching like ribbons of dawn. Its eyes shone with ancient sadness and fierce hope. The spirit bird. It landed softly in the clearing, the ground glowing beneath its talons. Eleanor stood frozen, her breath gone, overwhelmed by its presence. It was beautiful, not in a way she could describe, but in a way that made her feel small and safe at once. The spirit bird lowered its head toward Eleanor. The feather in her hands rose, drifting toward the creature and merging into its chest. Its voice filled her mind, not spoken aloud, but inside her heart. "Keeper, you have awakened what once slept." Eleanor trembled. "I don't know what to do." "You do," the voice answered gently. "You carry light within you. even when you cannot see it. Caleb watched silently, tears on his cheeks not from fear, but awe. The spirit bird extended one glowing wing. A single tear-shaped shard of light fell from its feathers, landing in Eleanor's palms. It was warm, pulsing, alive. The heartlight, she whispered. The spirit bird's eyes softened. A piece of it. The valley holds the rest. Take it to where the river begins. Eleanor nodded, though fear still knotted her stomach. What about the shadows? The bird looked at the dark shapes crouched far across the clearing, trembling. They were once light too. They became shadows when they forgot their purpose. You must remind the valley of what it was. Eleanor swallowed. I'll try. The spirit bird spread its wings. Light burst outward, sweeping across the clearing and dissolving the remaining shadows like dust in sunlight. Then it lifted into the sky, rising until it merged with the clouds. Silence settled. Caleb stepped to Eleanor's side. Are you okay? She nodded slowly. I think so. She looked down at the shard of heartlight, warm and safe in her palms. We know where to go now, Caleb said softly. The river's beginning the spring of echoes. That's where the valley's life started. Eleanor looked at the faint trickle of the dying river. And we can restore it. With that piece, Caleb said. I think you can. Eleanor took a deep breath. Then we have to go before the shadows find the rest. Caleb smiled, tired but hopeful. Then let's save the valley. She nodded. Her fear replaced not gone, but changed into something stronger. Something like courage. She took Caleb's hand. Together they followed the lantern north, toward the mountains where the river began, the shard of heartlight glowing between them like a promise. The valley waited, the shadows stirred, and Eleanor, keeper of the lantern, walked into her destiny with light guiding every step.